The night air was cool, carrying the faintest scent of pine and the earthy remnants of the day's heat. My high school graduation had just ended, but the sounds of celebration, laughter, music, and clinking glasses felt distant, muted, as if they were coming from another world. My family was inside the house, congratulating me, but I sat with my father on the back porch, away from the noise, under the soft glow of the dim porch light. There was something off tonight. Something in the air that made the celebration feel distant. My father, usually so stoic and unshakable, had been quiet all evening, nursing a drink in his hand. It was as if the light from the house couldn't reach him, and I felt like we were on the edge of something very dark. He looked at me for a long time before speaking, his voice suddenly low, barely audible over the faint sounds of music and chatter.
"Son,"
he said, his eyes flicking nervously to the trees that surrounded the backyard.
"I've been thinking. It's time you knew the truth about my past. About where I'm from."
I leaned in, sensing something heavy behind his words. "What do you mean?" He stared at the shadows in the trees, as if seeing something far beyond the edge of the porch light.
"You're about to step into the world. You think the biggest threats are out there, at school, in the city. But there are things you can't even imagine, lurking in the dark corners of the world. Things you don't see, even when they're right in front of you."
My skin prickled. "What are you talking about, Dad?" He took a long drink from his glass, his hand shaking ever so slightly, and set it down on the table between us. Then, without looking at me, he whispered,
"They're called the Faceless."
The name sent a cold shiver down my spine, and I felt my body stiffen. "What are they?" My father's voice grew distant, as if he were remembering something he wished he could forget.
"They're not like anything you've ever heard about. They're not ghosts or demons. They live in the shadows, deep in places like the deep, dark woods where I grew up. You can't run from them, and you don't fight them. If you see them, it's over."
I frowned, trying to make sense of his words. "Dad, this sounds insane. What do you mean, if you see them?" He turned slowly toward me, his eyes darkened with some terrible knowledge, as if he'd lived through something that haunted him every single day.
"If you catch a glimpse of them out of the corner of your eye, you won't see their face. It's just smooth, white skin, no features. No eyes, no mouth. Just a blank, empty surface where a face should be. And then they'll sing to you. It's not a song you can hear with your ears. It's something you feel inside your chest, like a memory. A pull. It's soft and soothing, and the moment you hear it, you want to follow it. You'll want to get closer. You'll want to see them, and that's when they get you."
I couldn't breathe for a moment. The air around me had turned oppressive, thick with something I couldn't name. "Dad, this is just some bedtime story, right?" He shook his head, the faintest tremor running through his hands.
"No, it's not. They exist. They've always existed. And they're more dangerous than anything you've ever seen. They steal your face, son. They take it. And once they do, you become one of them."
I stared at him, my mind struggling to keep up with the weight of his words. "What happens if they take your face?"
"They make you into one of them.
My father said, his voice thick with fear.
They rob you of who you are. You lose everything. The memory of your family, your life, your soul. And then you're just a faceless thing, wandering the woods, looking for others to steal from. You play their games, never remembering who you were or why you're there. And it never ends. You just keep searching, looking for someone else to take, forever."
A knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Did it happen to you? Did they take your face? His eyes grew distant.
It almost did. The night before my graduation, me and two of my best friends, we snuck out into the woods. We wanted to celebrate, to get away from the prying eyes of the town. And we heard them singing. It was beautiful at first, like nothing we'd ever heard. We followed it, deeper and deeper into the trees. But then we saw them.
My throat tightened. What happened? He closed his eyes as if the memory pained him.
Faceless children, dancing between the trees under the moonlight. They looked so innocent, so playful, their little hands reaching out as they danced in circles. But there was something wrong about them, something unnatural. I could hear my friends laughing, but their voices started to change. The laugh became high-pitched, like a mocking scream. I knew what was happening.
What did you do? I whispered.
I remembered my mother's warning, the story she used to tell me when I was little. So, I closed my eyes, hoping they couldn't get to me if I didn't look. But I could hear my friends. First laughing, then screaming. I felt cold fingers on my shoulders, pulling me in. I tried to run, but the ground seemed to shift under me, like the forest itself was alive and reaching for me.
He paused, swallowing hard.
I never looked back. I ran all the way back to town, and I never saw my friends again. The police searched for days, but they never found their bodies. I moved to the city thinking I'd escaped, but they never left me. They never forget.
A silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of my breath loud in my ears. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice shaking. Why tonight? He looked at me, his face pale and grim.
Because of the kids in your class, son. The ones who graduated in front of you, and the one behind you. They had the faces of my friends. The faceless have come for you now.
I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The backyard, the trees beyond, suddenly felt alive with something dark and hungry. I turned toward the woods, and I could feel them, watching. The laughter from the party inside had grown distant, as if a barrier had gone up between me and the world I knew. The night was silent, except for the faint, sweet melody of a song. So soft, so far away, but unmistakable. It was coming from the trees. Dad. I whispered, my voice barely audible. What do we do? He gripped my arm, his fingers cold and tight.
We don't look back. We don't listen. We run, and we never look back.
The air grew heavier, as if the darkness itself was pressing in on us. The song swelled, louder now, like an urgent call, a cry that seemed to echo deep inside my bones. I could feel it pulling at me, like an invisible thread drawing me toward the woods. My father's grip tightened.
Don't you dare look back!
He hissed.
If you do, it's over!
I could almost see them, behind the trees, within the shadows. The faceless figures, their blank, white faces like smooth porcelain masks, waiting, watching. The song reached a crescendo. It was no longer distant. It was here. It was inside my head.
Run!
My father shouted to me. I turned to sprint, but the world around me seemed to warp, the trees bending toward me, as if the forest itself was alive. I could feel the air shift behind me, the presence of something near, too close to be safe. Something cold and hungry. I could hear the faintest whisper. I ran, and I didn't dare look back.